Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about some things that I have mentioned briefly in my budget reports for the last few months. That is primarily that I owe money to the IRS. If you've been following along with my monthly budget reviews, you've seen that for the last few months, ever since I filed my taxes, I've been paying $200 a month to the IRS. And I told you that I would explain if there was an interest in making a video, and some of you did request one, so this is me giving you the full explanation as to what's going on. The reason that I'm paying $200 a month with the IRS is because back in fiscal year 2018, something was different about my employment than it ever has been before. And that is that I had 1099 income. And in the past, I've had 1099 income, but it was always a small part of my income, and I always had a W-2 job at the same time. But in 2018, for almost the entire year, I couldn't find real work. So I worked as an Uber and Lyft driver, and I worked for Lyft as a recruiter, which I was also paid as a contractor for that. What this meant is that the vast majority of my income in 2018 was based as an independent contractor, and I got 1099 for it. This of course means that I have to set aside taxes and that I'm going to be taxed at a higher tax rate. Of course, I knew this going into it, but I was so broke in 2018 that I needed every penny that I could get, and I didn't have the money to put anything away to save for paying my taxes. That being said though, I thought I was in the clear. I didn't think I'd get a refund, but I thought I wouldn't end up paying taxes. The reason I thought this was I was concerned about having to pay taxes and not being able to, or not being able to save anything for it throughout the year. But as a Lyft recruiter, I was taking a ton of Uber rides, and I would always ask the drivers, like, hey, when you file your taxes, do you end up owing anything, or how does that work out for you? And every one of them told me, no, actually, like, I don't end up owing any taxes after all my write-offs, especially my mileage write-off. Which, to me, meant, well, I should be good then. Because I did drive for Rideshare pretty much full-time for a lot of the spring of 2018. And in that time period, I put 11,000 miles on the car. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I know roughly how much I've made this year, and I know roughly what my tax rate is. So I looked at that, and then I looked at, well, but I put 11,000 miles in my car, and the 2018 IRS business mileage rate was 56.5 cents per mile. When I multiply that by 11,000, I got a number that should be greater than what I would owe in my taxes. So that put my mind at ease about not being able to put any money away toward the taxes that I might owe. Although I wouldn't have been able to afford to put that money away even if I knew that I had to owe anything. The problem came in this, and I did try to do my due diligence, but really it came down to two things. The Uber drivers were giving me incorrect information, and I didn't understand, and this is where I messed up, I didn't understand the difference between a tax credit and a tax deduction. And that is essentially where I got messed up, because I looked at it as, well, 56.5 cents per mile times 11,000 miles, like, that's going to be credited to my tax bill. And that's not true. What actually happened is that amount was a deduction from my adjusted gross income, and then my taxes owed were then calculated based on that lowered adjusted gross income. At the end of all of this, I owed a lot of money. I owed about $2,700 just to the federal. State taxes, at the very last moment, I was able not to pay those. I thought I was going to owe Ohio a couple $100, and I ended up getting a new tax credit for low-income business owners, so that I actually got a very small refund from the state, around like maybe $50 or so. So when I filed my taxes this year, I paid as much as I thought I reasonably could spare toward that tax bill. And then I set up a payment plan with the IRS to pay $200 every month on the 28th until the rest of it was paid off. I wasn't happy with it, but That was just the way it was. About a month or so after filing my taxes, I found out about a healthcare exemption that I could have gotten that I didn't know about. You see, in addition to the taxes owed, there were two charges that I got, and one was for not paying quarterly taxes on self-employed income, but because of my actual income, that was reduced down to about $55 that I had to pay for that. But on top of that was a huge charge of $695 for shared responsibility for the Affordable Care Act. Now, in 2018, I was dead broke. I could barely afford food, and like I said, I couldn't even set aside money for taxes. I did look into plans on the marketplace for healthcare, but it just absolutely was not possible. There weren't even any cheap plans. They were hundreds of dollars per month. And of course, being self-employed, I didn't have any employer offering me insurance plans. Not that I could have afforded to use the insurance had I actually had it. So essentially, this shared responsibility for the Affordable Care Act is just a poor tax, and it is so that people who can't afford to have health care and therefore don't have health care just get screwed over. Fortunately, 2018 is the last year that that existed, and I don't have to worry about that in the future, even though I do now have insurance through my job. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have to worry about it. But to take care of it for this very last year, for fiscal year 2018, I found out that I qualified for an exemption. So for the first time ever, I realized I was going to have to amend my taxes. First of all, I went through the healthcare marketplace and I found I was eligible for an exemption, a hardship exemption. And specifically, that hardship exemption was that if you got a shut-off notice for your utilities during the year, then you got this exemption. Now, the way it works is you didn't actually have to have your utilities turned off. You just had to have a notice that they would be turned off. So I had quite a few of those. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but one way that I made it work was I was a couple months late on all of my utilities and just paid whatever I needed to pay right before it got shut off, just to keep things afloat, which meant both my gas and my electric bill, I had these shut-off notices. Well, the way it works with this exemption is that it doesn't matter if it's every month for every utility or if it's just 1 month for one utility. But because I turned these in, it covered me for the entire year of 2018. That total $695 just wiped out. That would have been simple enough had I known about that when I filed my taxes. But since I didn't know about it, what I ended up having to do was amend the taxes. Now, I've worked for 19 years. I filed my taxes every year on my own since I was a sophomore in high school. And I've always, well, I used to do it on paper like way back in the day, but ever since the online, like TurboTax and TaxSlayer and those kind of online things came out, I've always done it that way because it is easier than doing it on paper. When I got that exemption, it said that it could be months before I'd get the actual certificate and the exemption number to put on my taxes, but fortunately it was a fairly quick process. They approved it right away, and within a couple of weeks I had that number. So then I could go ahead and I could amend my taxes. Now when you amend your taxes, you have to file by mail. So it's not like when you e-file and you get a response within a few days. They say that it's going to be 16 weeks. They say that it will be between 1 and 3 weeks for them to actually acknowledge that they received it. And then you have to wait another 16 weeks, which is 4 months. So we're talking about essentially up to almost 5 months from the time that you actually mail out your amended return to the time that you get it amended. And that's an insane amount of time. I don't understand how it takes that long. But the only thing that I needed to change on there was this healthcare thing. So I thought, well, maybe it won't take that long. So I send it in, and I see that it's accepted. And like a week after it's accepted, it says that the adjustment has been made. And I'm thrilled because I'm off the hook and I don't have to continue paying this $200 a month. But it says that within a week of the adjustment being made, that you're going to receive something in the mail confirming it. And I didn't receive anything. So I ended up calling the IRS. I've only dealt with one once before, and it was actually a fairly good experience. I was expecting that same thing this time. But when I got somebody on the phone after being on hold for 45 minutes to an hour, she was very nice, but she was completely clueless. The IRS had never heard of a healthcare exemption. They had never heard of a hardship exemption. They had no idea what I was talking about. And to me, that's very concerning. I'm like, how does the IRS not know about this? So she can't give me any information whatsoever, and she transfers me to an attorney with the healthcare marketplace. And ironically, it was that attorney who was able to actually tell me what was in the IRS's systems and what was going on. Remember that I filed my amended return with TurboTax, or at least I had them prepare it. I printed it out and I mailed it as instructed. Here's what happened. TurboTax did not fill out the form properly. They filled out the worksheet for the amendment, but then down below in the columns did not fill out the amount that it needed to be adjusted. So the IRS adjusted it, supposedly, but adjusted the change for $0. And despite the IRS website telling me that they were going to contact me to confirm any changes made, I still, a couple of months later now, have not received anything from them. And when I asked the person on the phone why I wasn't told that this change was like that, or why I wasn't contacted to say that there was something wrong with it, she claimed, that's not what we do. We're not outbound. We just answer questions when you contact us. And I'm like, okay, well then why does it say on your website that you will do this and you didn't do it? And also, I don't believe that the IRS does not reject returns that are incorrect, because that's kind of what they're known for. And yet she's telling me that that's not what they do. So anyway, obviously, like, I don't want to deal with this person. I go back to the drawing board. I see what she's talking about on the form. And in fact, TurboTax did not completely fill out the form. And this is where it gets super complicated. Because at this point, TurboTax has screwed this up to where I can't just file another amended return, because now the information that it's asking for on that form, I don't know if it's asking the difference between the original return and the new return, or the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. So I am at a point now, and I'm getting a little out of order here, but I'll get it all in the video. Now, it is, for the first time in 19 years, too complicated for me to handle. So I am going to have to go and pay more money and go to something like H&R Block and have them look at it and fix the amended return. That also means that I'm going to have to wait probably another 5 months. And at this point, it's probably going to interfere with the refund that I'll get for 2019's taxes when I file them in 2020. And then at that point, I might have to adjust something there. It's just become a huge nightmare. The other side of this is that I did completely pay off the remainder of the taxes that I owed. With that $200 a month, at the end of August, I had paid off everything. And in fact, I actually paid more than everything, because my remaining payment, I think in August, was $185. I paid $200, which meant like $15 went toward that shared responsibility that I shouldn't be having to pay. So the shared responsibility payment, as far as the IRS concerned, is still sitting there. It is earning interest at an extremely low rate, and I'm not even concerned with it. The entire time since taxes were due in April to the statement that I received in the mail today, only $13 in interest has been accrued on there, so I'm not concerned, and hopefully that'll all be waived once this whole thing is sorted out. But as I said, I made the last payment in August, and for September and now October, I have not made the payment. That does technically mean that I'm defaulting on a payment arrangement with the IRS. However, it's actually okay. The only downside is that if you default on a payment plan with them, there is a certain period of time, a certain number of years, where you can't make another one. But that's the only downside to it. According to the statement that they just sent me today, the SRP, meaning the shared responsibility payment, is not subject to a notice of federal tax lien filing, levy on your property, or the failure to pay penalty. So essentially, what that means is that all of the scary things that the IRS can do to you if you don't pay them or if you default on a payment plan, they can't do to me. And because things have been so tight and I really reasonably cannot pay $200 a month, that's why I stopped paying that. And I'm just going to spend what I would spend in one payment and go to H&R Block, have them fix the whole situation. And then at that point, it's pretty much just a waiting game until the IRS decides to process it and get everything fixed. So I guess there are two positives really to take away from this. And the first is I'm not paying $200 a month anymore, and I, along with that, don't have to worry about repercussions about that from the IRS. Now, depending on how all this works out, one of two things can happen. If this is all taken care of by the time that I have filed my taxes and I'm awaiting my refund for 2019's taxes in 2020, then that means this will just be wiped out, and then I'll just get my refund for 2019. If it takes as long as the IRS expects it to take, then what could happen instead is that they pay this amount off out of the refund that I would get in 2020 from 2019's taxes. At that point, I have to ask H&R Block how exactly to go about filing for a refund for a past year. I know there's a process to do it. It's one of those super complicated things that I'm just going to let them deal with. But at some point, either number one, I just don't have to pay this, or number two, they've taken it out of a future refund and then I get that refund back as a lump sum of money. And that's where things stand right now. I have to go make an appointment, hopefully this month, with H&R Block to get all this straightened out. And hopefully it's not super expensive. That's why I've really been putting it off, is just, I don't want to spend that money. But that will get everything in place to get it taken care of, and we'd just be waiting on the IRS at that point. So that's pretty much it. If I hope this explained to those who questioned what was going on with the taxes and why I was paying every month. This is why I was paying. This is also why I'm not paying anymore. And this is what I've got to work on to get figured out here in the near future. This shouldn't ever be a problem again because I'm back to working a full-time W-2 job. And while I do have some 1099 income, like my bonuses I get from Instacart and my AdSense money from YouTube, essentially it's a small part of my income. So I don't have to worry too much about what I might have to pay in taxes, because what I'm paying in W-2 taxes is going to offset it. And even if it didn't, it would be a much smaller amount of money than what I had to pay for 2018. So if you guys have any questions about it, leave it down in the comments. If any of you have like any familiarity with the shared responsibility payment or the exemptions to it, or with the IRS just being not exactly competent, feel free to leave that down below, and I'll try to comment back on that. I appreciate you guys watching, and thanks for sticking around with me on this journey.